And then I'm also actually going to turn on the captions in case that's helpful for anyone. Okay, I think we should be set up now. So, hi, everybody. Welcome and good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hayla Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading of new work from the press. We're going to be hearing from experts in their field. Nancy Willbern, author of Rupture in the Canvas, The Hidden Doorway to Your Soul's Evolution, released on July 22nd. Karen James, author of Dealing Addiction, How the Canadian Government Derailed Addiction Recovery, released on September 2nd. And Melinda Zappone, author of You Are Not Broken, Break Free from the Fixing Yourself Mindset with the Toolbox Approach, which is released on October 7th, just this past week. All three authors' books can be purchased from online retailers and from select bookstores. You can, of course, also find the books on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/book. And I'm actually going to put the links directly to each book in the chat so you can easily check them out that way. At the end of the readings, we will have time for your questions. So if you have a question for one or more of our authors, at any time, go ahead and type those in the chat and I will make sure they get asked. Please do stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for praise and comments in addition to your questions. And one last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Nancy, Karen, and Melinda today. We're going to start with our first reader, who is Nancy Willbern. Nancy has been a transpersonal psychotherapist in private practice for nearly 3 decades. Fascinated with the intersection of psychology and spirituality, she thinks of herself more as a midwife to the soul than a traditional clinician. A condensed version of the chapter Splintered Pieces was published in the January/February edition of the journal Spirituality and Health. Nancy now lives with her husband just outside the Austin city limits on the edge of the Texas Hill Country. Today, we're going to be hearing Nancy read from Rupture in the Canvas, a teaching memoir written not only for those who have experienced one or more life ruptures, those heart-stopping, mind-blowing events that leave us severed from all our identity touchstones, but for those who have been propelled by such disruptions to understand them within the wider context of their lives. It's written for readers who want to learn how to reorient themselves to the foreign and unexpected territory they now find themselves in. Let's welcome Nancy.
Thank you, Hayla, and thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon and taking up your Sunday afternoon time. We appreciate it. I'm going to give just a little bit of background before I start reading to give you some context. In this particular passage, I'm sharing some of what I experienced during the period of surrounding my first rupture, which was the shattering of my first marriage. My former husband of 22 years, Josh, and I have been going to intensive marriage counseling at the time. And in one of those sessions, he confesses that he has had multiple affairs throughout the marriage. This passage begins with one of my responses to this information. As part of my continued healing, I got the names and addresses of each of the women Josh had been with so I could write to each of them. I started my letter by asking its recipients to read it in its entirety, after which they could burn it or throw it away. I didn't care. I then introduced myself to them as Nancy, Josh's wife. I wanted them to know that I would no longer play the role of a phantom person living in the wings of his life. I was real. I had a name and a life of my own. I was the mother of Josh's 3 children. I was writing to tell them that whenever they visualized their times with Josh, to now see me and our 3 children standing at the foot of the bed right there in the room with them, they could pretend that we didn't exist and that their rendezvous with Josh were private affairs, but in truth, their actions had and were still having deep effects on all of us. After they read the letter, they could do anything with that information they wanted. It was up to them. I addressed and stamped the envelopes and put them in the mail, trusting that the truth would take over from there. In our therapy sessions during our separation, it really did feel like Josh and I were coming together. We were continuing to learn about ourselves and how we had each played a part in creating such a convoluted mess. Over those months, I believed that we were, to the best of our ability, trying to find our way back to each other, to remember the very real love that lived underneath our mistaken assumptions about ourselves: love, marriage, and truth. It seemed that we were on the road toward greater healing. At the same time we were creating this new bond, I was completing my doctorate degree in developmental psychology. These two major segments of my life had been following a parallel track. Just before my doctoral graduation, I had an experience that exposes how these two equidistant lines in my life intersected. I will never really know its real significance or not, but I choose to believe that the universe, our spirit guides, the wholeness that holds us all, uses everything on our behalf, anything that will catch our attention. Here's the story of my experience. I asked my good friend Sharon to go with me to San Antonio to shop for a new outfit to wear after my graduation. I found some silk flowy pants and muted pastels and a moss green linen jacket. I was thrilled with the find. On the spur of the moment, on our way home, Sharon and I decided to stop by a monastery outside Blanco, Texas, a mystical place that we had heard about for years. Yes, in the hole-in-the-wall Blanco, Texas, no less. This was a Greek Orthodox convent located, of all places, on a hardscrabble goat farm. It was known for its myrrh weeping Mother Mary icon. Folks came from all around to witness the tears and to receive a blessing from the Sacred Mother. Sharon and I are not Greek Orthodox. We're not even Catholic. In fact, we had both been raised in the Bible Belt of the South. But as adults, we were also both fascinated with all things spiritual and esoteric, and were open to experiencing the sacred in any of its forms. We didn't know if icons could literally cry tears of myrrh from some indefinable sacred space, or if the nuns squirted the tears on the image with an eyedropper after hours. And truth be told, we didn't really care. We wanted to experience the place with curiosity and leave all judgment back in the hardscrabble pastures. We drove up the winding gravel road, goats grazing behind wire fencing on either side, until we got to a parking lot. We discovered several small buildings built in a semicircle. Hanging on one of them was a sign that read something like Mother Mary Icon Viewings. We walked up to the door and opened it gently. An extremely tall, she must have been over 6 feet, Orthodox African-American nun, dressed in full black habit from head to toe, came to the door to let us know that the session had started, but she would wait for us. Noticing that we had come bareheaded and in casual summer attire, she showed us a cardboard box filled with a collection of crumpled handmade wraparound skirts and another filled with scarves and lace hankies. She instructed us to tie a skirt over our shorts and to put a scarf or handkerchief on our heads. We clearly had not come prepared. Putting hand-sewn skirts over our shorts and lace doilies on our heads exposed the ridiculousness of this adventure. Looking at each other in this strange getup got us to laughing. We were suddenly struck with the outlandishness of what we were doing. We had stepped so far out of character, but there was something about this stretching that enabled us to actually lay our cynical skepticism aside. Either we were going all out or we were going to stay within the bounds of rationality. We chose to trust in the beyond the pale of the moment, despite our very educated reservations. In a few minutes, the nun came back out and escorted us into the tiny viewing room. The Mother Mary icon was placed reverently on a podium in the center of the space. An overhead spotlight lit her face with a golden glow. About 4 or 5 other women were already there, standing quietly in a circle around the image. They were all dressed in their Sunday best with lace mantillas draped over their heads. The nun escorted us to view the icon individually. She explained to each of us that Mary was not weeping that day, but showed us the stains left from previous tears, and then asked if we would like to be blessed by the Holy Mother. When it was my turn to view the image and to accept the blessing or not, I said yes without hesitation. She asked me if I had a particular petition for the Mother, and I said, yes, I need final clarity about my marriage. I need a sign to tell me what to do. The nun said a prayer to Mother Mary requesting clarity on my behalf. I closed my eyes and moved into a genuine space of connection as she worded the prayer. I sank down deep inside myself in a place of quiet reverence. It was as if the others in the room had been blanketed from my awareness. In that one moment of petition, it was just me and the Holy Mother, the sacred archetype of all that is nurturing, comforting, the divine presence of outpouring love and compassion for the human condition. In that moment, it was just me and Mary and the earnestness of my prayer. I could not have articulated it at the time, but I had moved into that miraculous liminal space again where things are neither literal nor abstract. A place that my rational mind couldn't wrap itself around, but a place that I was beginning to recognize and love. The nun then drew the symbol of the cross on my forehead with her thumb. I returned to the circle with an open heart, ready to look for signs, trusting that they would come. The following Friday night, Josh threw a surprise graduation party for me at the home of one of our friends. When we walked through the front door, all of my friends and family were lined up on the spiraling staircase in the foyer. They beamed back at me and shouted, and as they shouted, "Surprise!" in unison. Josh had done an incredible job orchestrating all of it, and I was truly surprised. I felt taken aback by all the outpouring of love that flooded in my direction. Josh had put so much attention into every detail, knowing exactly what I would want. I felt my heart open to him again, despite the pain that he had caused me. The love and the pain always seemed to go together. I know now that this moment was a joyful quiet before the storm to come. The next day, May 14th, 1994, was the day of my graduation from my full-time 6-year doctoral program. To say that it was a milestone is to miss the real importance of the event. It wasn't just the completion of an academic goal. It marked the arrival of my coming out, my movement from my fated bird in the cage to my destined flight out into the world, flying on my own fledgling wings. Before I left for the ceremony, I went to check the mail and found 2 letters in the box addressed to me. One was from somewhere in the States. I can't remember which one, maybe California. And the other was from Australia. I opened them immediately and knew they were from 2 of the women I had written introducing myself. Unwittingly, they both revealed that Josh had been with them during the time of our separation, exposing that he had not stayed true to our agreements. He was still at it and still lying about it. My body reacted to this revelation just like it had in those truth-telling sessions in our therapist office. My stomach knotted up, my heart raced and ached, my whole being hurt. I walked slowly into our bedroom where Josh was getting dressed and showed him the letters. What could he say? He was caught, and our whole house of cards came tumbling down once and for all. My prayer had been answered. I was hit with the power and the rawness of undeniable clarity. Mother Mary had sent me an unequivocal sign. It took my breath away. Somehow I managed to get in my car and drive myself to the university. I stood in line just like all the other graduates and acted as if my life had not just lost all of its integrity. Josh and the kids came together in his car and sat in the stands. They watched as I walked up on stage in my black graduation gown, 3 stripes on the sleeves to signify my doctoral level. They watched me approach the podium, as my name was called, as I was handed my diploma and then stood with my back to my dissertation chairman as he ceremonially placed the burnt orange and white doctoral hood over the awkward square, flat mortarboard balanced on the top of my head, its gold tassel blowing in the breeze. As they watched, a part of me moved proudly through all of those time-honored rituals, while another part of me was so shocked it was a struggle not to float out of my body. My 2 worlds collided into that one heart-stopping instant. I was filled with both the deepest sadness and the greatest sense of accomplishment I had ever experienced. My fate and my destiny appeared together in one pivotal moment, giving me a choice about how I wanted my future to unfold. I would realize later that my graduation signified not only earning my PhD, but also my initiation into my own reality, my truer identity, my consciously chosen destiny.
Thank you so much, Nancy. That was such a moving reading, and especially to hear and feel that emotion coming from you, even as you were recalling this. So thank you so much for that reading today. Reading next today is Karen James. Karen spent 27 years working in the field of addiction treatment and counseling with a wide range of clients from teens to those in conflict with the law in Canada. She was a creative child who grew up in a family impacted by addiction, and as a result of that impact, she became addicted too. After the loss of that family and recovery, she worked to help others. She's both an artist and a poet and has tried to champion the rights of those who have no voice. This book is an attempt to right some of those wrongs, but also to encourage some accountability in recovery. The book in question is Dealing Addiction: How the Canadian Government Derailed Addiction Recovery, and it's a powerful, unflinching exploration of addiction, blending personal insight with professional expertise. Karen, who, as I mentioned, grew up in an addicted family and later battled addiction herself, brings over 27 years of experience in the field to this eye-opening account. The book is a call to action for honest, compassionate reform, and it's essential reading for those seeking a deeper understanding of addiction and the role individuals and systems must play in meaningful recovery. So, Karen, I've asked you to unmute on the Zoom, and you can take it away.
Thank you. So, yes, I wrote this book. Somewhat of it is my personal experience with addiction, and that's what I like to read about. And later, the book talks about the effects of addiction in the system itself, but I'll read from my own personal experience today. So the single most destructive event of my entire life was the fact that my mother predicted her death on my 19th birthday when I was 5 years old, and then died a month and a day before I turned 19. I will never forget my Aunt Dot responding to my mother saying, "Oh my God, Millie, you can't say that to a child." My mother believed that it was her duty to raise us and that once we were adults, we would just abandon her and she would end up alone. It was the reason that she chose my 19th birthday as the date of her death. She would call me into the dining room in front of all my relatives and say, "When she's 19, I'm going to die." And she did this every year from the time I was 5 years old. I was the youngest child and I would be an adult by then, and of course, I would also abandon her. She made me aware of this belief, and then I spent my young life trying to prove that I would not abandon her. It was the perfect trap. I could get her to love me if I gave up my childhood for her, and it was an awful price to pay. I entered her world and carried her despair and anger inside of me. I lost my childhood, and despite this awful sacrifice, she still died a day and a month before I turned 19. I felt like I had been the clock ticking down to her death. Each year that brought me closer to 19 made that reality ever more difficult. At the funeral, many aunts reminded me of her prediction and marveled at how close she had come to my actual birthday. I did not need to be reminded of this because I had lived with it ever since I was 5. Parents say many things and then never realize that what their words do to their children. As children, we are not able to decipher what a parent means when they say something like my mother said to me. We attempt to understand, but our limits leave us with an interpretation that can often be more damaging than the real meaning of what was said. Today, I understand what motivated my mother to say what she said, but as a child, my interpretation was the painful realization that I had somehow destroyed her life. Parents also believe that children will forget what happened when they were children or what was said to them. Believe me when I tell you that they did not forget. I remember exactly what my mother said to me. She said, "I needed you as much as I needed two heads, and why I ever had you, I'll never know." Those words would echo in my mind throughout my childhood and become a shadow over my adult life as well. Growing up with the kind of awful binds that addicted parents put their children in is extremely damaging. Children are being raised in these very unhealthy environments that teach them a variety of rules that work against them. Addicted homes teach their children to keep silent and never reveal what is actually going on in the home. The rule is without exception. You cannot speak about what is going on in the home. That would be akin to treason. Children are also taught to suppress their feelings. Addicted parents do not want to have to deal with their children's issues. You must ignore your feelings for the sake of your parents' needs and wishes. You must also know there is no one you can trust, not even your own family members. In my family, you could also not get ill because it was an inconvenience to my mother that she could not afford. She couldn't take time off work, so she could not have an ill child to care for. In the summer, we were sent to a farm to avoid having to be babysat. Sometimes necessity dictates the decisions that parents make. My mother struggled with poverty, so anything that threatened the meager wages she received could not be wasted in emergencies. If one of us was ill, she would have to get a babysitter or take the day off work, and she couldn't do this. She would become incredibly angry at any of us who got ill. We learned to hide if we were ill, and I remember my brother making me and my sister promise that we would not tell my mother when he had split open the palm of his hand after sliding down a rope that had a nail in it. Again, from a children's vantage point, the why wouldn't have been understood, and the rule would be one more thing that seemed confusing. The underlying message would clearly be that you could not expect to be comforted if you were ill or had hurt yourself. During the stage of childhood illnesses, my mother would put us all together if one of us got an illness like measles. It was easier to handle if we all had measles or if we became ill at the same time. Once when I was 7, I ruptured myself learning to ride a bike, and I didn't tell my mother. I hid my pants in the closet, my sister told her, and I was terrified of her finding out. I also often fell as a kid, and this infuriated my mother because I often tore the knees out of my pants. She couldn't afford clothes for us, so this became another hardship for her, and she would yell at me, "What's wrong with you? Don't you know how to walk?" The difficulties faced by families that have to struggle to manage financially were worsened by my mother's alcoholism and her rage. It was exasperated by the difficulties of her life. When she couldn't handle things, she would rage at us. We were part of the struggle she faced because she had to feed and clothe us and pay for all the bills on top of that. Some people point to the alcohol and say, but she could afford that. That is true. But she used alcohol as some relief, even though it never really provided that relief. She returned to it over and over again because that's all that she could find. I would see myself resort to the same flawed reasoning over and over, not knowing what else to do, even though it actually caused me more problems in the long run. It is the insanity of addiction. It initially seems like the answer, and by the time it clearly becomes the problem, you are either too addicted or too mentally affected to either make the connection or stop. After my father left, my mother sat us down and told us that we were to tell people at school and anyone else who asked that our father was dead. This was a serious bind for me because we attended Catholic school and lying was a sin. The alternative would be worse, dealing with my mother's wrath. My mother didn't want people to know that my father was a criminal or that he had taken off. This would have brought her unnecessary shame. The trial had already caused her embarrassment because some of the neighbors had come and testify. After her death, I found a small piece of paper cut out of the newspaper in her wallet that said, Robert Byron James no longer resides at 267 Florence Street. I believe back then that you had to have this put in the paper for some legal reasons, but the fact that she'd carried it around with her all those years spoke volumes about how hurt she had been. I've chosen to write this book because I wanted to shine a light on just how damaging addiction is and to hopefully speak for some of the people who never get considered in a response to this problem. I saw firsthand how addiction can deliver a death blow to any chance of some family peace and joy. I experienced how an addicted parent can destroy the childhood of her children, and even though that might be the last thing that she would have wanted. I do not believe that my mother set out to deliberately destroy my childhood, but in her addiction, she did so. Addiction creates a very self-centered response to the world. It creates a trap that does not allow people to heal from whatever pain their life has dealt them. Unresolved pain drives addiction, and the pain leaks out in the most destructive ways. I would come to know that personally as well, as my own addiction developed and took over my life and leaked out over the people around me. I tried alcohol for the first time when I was 7 years old. I did not know what it was when I was offered a glass of wine while we were visiting an Italian family that had once lived in the same house as us. They had moved away and they had invited us to come over for dinner one evening. They offered me a glass of wine, which was for them a cultural norm, and I took it and drank it. I believe I had a second glass that evening before my mother headed home with all of us on foot. I was so drunk I couldn't walk right. My mother was very upset because this would not look good if anyone saw us or stopped us. It would be hard to explain why her youngest child was so drunk she could barely walk. I was violently ill when I got home. The next time I drank, I was 13 years old. It was relatively easy to drink in the house. My brother had parties in the basement and he had alcohol, and he gave us some if we didn't tell my mother he'd brought it into the house. Eventually, the lines blurred, and my mother allowed us to drink in the house as long as we didn't go out. I had a problem right off the bat. I couldn't seem to control my drinking. I would drink until long past the point where I should have stopped. The only thing that offered me some control was that I didn't always have access every day. When I was 15 years of age, my mother wanted a drinking partner. She used to drink with an aunt who had lived with us, but after she moved out, my mother wanted someone to drink with at home. Since I had somehow become her co-parent, she decided it would be me. At first, I didn't really want to drink with her all the time, but she was always very insistent. She would say, "Come on, have a drink with your mother," over and over until I just gave in. It's not like I didn't want to drink alcohol, but I think early on I was aware of how damaging it was and how it affected my family. My mother and my aunt frequently fought when they were drinking. It was just another source of difficulty I had to put up with, as they warred with each other every time they drank. These were some of the worst fights I had witnessed. They both drank far too much when they drank together. This was also the source of information for most of the family's dysfunctional secrets. They spilled out venom as one family member yelled at another. These kinds of experiences are normal in addicted families, but they are not normal. They are crazy-making. These very disturbing incidents played out over and over throughout my life, and I was never able to understand this. Once my aunt and mother were fighting during Christmas dinner when all my relatives were present, and my aunt stated she was going to jump off the balcony. She headed upstairs, and my mother and sister ran outside. My mother yelled up to the balcony that she should hurry up and jump because it was cold outside, and she added that she wasn't going to clean up the mess. This was so distressing for me, but it seemed like I should have considered it as just part of normal behavior. I was looked at as if I was the person that had a problem. How do children understand the world they are living in when the events taking place in their home make no sense? You can't ask the people involved to help you understand it because they're the people that are causing it. How do children manage this when they are sworn to secrecy, so they can't even ask someone else about what is going on? There is no way to make sense of the incidences such as these. These are not normal behaviors, but if you do not have anything to compare them to, then what is really normal?
Thank you so much, Karen. That was really, I mean, quite a volatile reading, right? And I think that's part of what's so important about this and what's so compelling to hear the story. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today. Our final reader for today is Melinda Zappone. Melinda has dedicated her life to mental health and healing trauma. In her 20s, she broke into the mental health profession as a student research assistant, frustrated with how to make helping more than a science and confined to a therapist-patient relationship. As a trauma therapist, Melinda often found herself frustrated by the limitations of traditional psychotherapy. Wanting more for her patients than for herself, she began a journey to develop a united process of healing unprocessed or partially emotional content. That brings us to You Are Not Broken, which asks readers to join Melinda as she breaks free from fixing herself and learns from the very sessions she conducted to create the phases of healing. This is a repair journey that incorporates personal trauma, case examples, expert tools, and creative and genuine adaptation for a self-help audience. Melinda seeks to acknowledge that trusting oneself with tools for inner work, while not therapy, may be the only path for so many who need to take back their hope and healing and become not broken. We'll hear more now from Melinda.
Thank you so much. I'm just so grateful to be here. I was on a hike this morning. Even though this book was really finished 3 years ago, I was saying I woke up this morning like I'm an author. Like, I've been a therapist for 20 years, so this is actually quite a shock. And I kind of wanted to ask something or invite something of the audience today, because I am so grateful that I get to be both things. And it's making me realize the whole point of, I don't know, maybe my spirit calling me to do this is to recognize how to listen to your life, listen to what you've been through, and the past of what you've been through, but also the present of what you're going through. And when you write a book like this, You Are Not Broken, and I'm holding it in my hands, realizing like it was also me listening to You Are So Broken. And um, we need to teach each other how to hold space for both, because it's so necessary. So, I wrote this book, you're here to listen to it, but I wonder if you can be that listener that we're asking for, is just kind of, how does this land in you? So if you're here and you're hearing this title, You Are Not Broken, try making that about you. If you kind of like put a hand on your forehead and say, like, what in my life needs to hear this You Are Not Broken message comes from knowing that maybe something is broken, and that's okay. That's what we're here for. So I'm just going to let the reading speak for itself and stop talking. Dedication. We can both hide from and face fears while writing and reading human stories. What happened while hiding deep inside my own fears and also fighting them with words on a page was an awakening. My hope is that this is going to seem familiar to you, and therefore it is dedicated to the potential of this. I knew I had to face the fear that with all the mistakes I made, I had missed my chance at a truly happy life. As I was writing, I wondered how many of you are out there afraid of just this. I am certain that a part of writing and reading is to feel less alone. This is for everyone who has lost, failed, or missed something and realize it is most profoundly an unfaced part of you that aches the most. Writing is for both the writer and the reader. There is little separation, and the end is never that, but a beginning and an invitation to look at life differently. Dedicate yourself to inner work in whatever way you can, and it becomes the truth of life's purpose. Inner work is for facing feeling afraid of who you are, how you have felt and still are feeling, and accepting that this fear is universal. We are all afraid of what we hold inside. You may go inside alone, but if we all equally need this, what kind of alone are we afraid of besides our own fearful ideas? There is a way to go inside, repair, and heal. You can choose what to be and call it your job, or you can choose who to be and call it your responsibility. Do not fear opening too much, not enough, or failing somehow. I invite you to believe that inner work cannot be failed. Let us not give up in our repairs. To try is to grow. This book is a dedication to beginning inner work. We all need tools for repairing ourselves back to wholeness. Will you begin your journey? Introduction. I never meant to die. I never meant to die and come back to life. I was just trying to find myself. Suddenly, I was falling, and when I hit the pavement, my teeth shattered. But somehow there was more falling to do. I plummeted down through an abyss. It was not a lighted tunnel sort of dying and a path to a darker kind of death. I felt my body leaving me, but more horribly, I heard people suffering in between life and death, and I was aware my soul was one of them. For a moment, I was in true death darkness. It marked me, but I survived. Then I woke to ambulance sirens. My clothes were lifted, and I felt I was exposed, but also held in someone's arms on a city street sidewalk. Me and my anonymous someone were waiting to get things fixed. I didn't know how many things were broken. My tongue was the only thing moving, and I felt the space where my teeth had been. The blood was a meal held inside my mouth, and it dribbled down my youthful body, aging it with every drop, like life still leaving me. They told me I was alive and an ambulance was coming. I was a month from being 19 years old and afraid. Would I ever come back to life without my teeth to hold my face and the smile that had been so familiar to me? If there was no smile to wear, what would happen to hide the shame of my choices? Exactly how broken was I? I felt a part of me had died and a light inside me was out somehow, but it also felt familiar. Somewhere, something inside remembered this feeling from before now. This fragmented me on the pavement felt familiar, but the shame of the moment was eclipsing it as a memory, and I was forced into the present-day nightmare. In that moment, I knew that even a quadruply broken heart was not an excuse for false bravado, and this broken me was all my fault. I followed a band and I did too many drugs. I could not pretend it was some path to freedom. It was a broken attempt at escaping myself. I waited for the ambulance to scoop me up and bring me to the fixing place, the hospital. I thought at 19 years old this was my first confrontation with brokenness, but the truth was I had let myself submerge the nightmares of my memory before. Below the surface there were memories, and my 19-year-old landscape was like icebergs against a backdrop of blue skies. It all seems like a picturesque scene when you can't see the dark waters below. Like Sleeping Beauty, I cast a spell on it all and fell asleep to it. The younger me supposed that nearly dying was just a nightmare I had to keep down below, so I restricted my sleep and I stood watch over my body in the night. Waking up into a nightmarish reality would never happen again to me if I could help it. I never meant to die, did I? The next time I woke into a nightmare of death, I was 40 years old and had fallen asleep watching my mother in her own decline toward the end of her life. She was leaving the bed like a whisper. I was on watch for exactly this reason, to block her from going to the bathroom on her own, but I fell dead asleep, and I felt alarm everywhere. Mine had been a body that had not slept fully in years. Something kept it on guard always. I was a machine of survival mode living, so why now was the machine malfunctioning and failing at the decades of mandated watchfulness? The why now was another whisper in the room. My mother was whittled down to 70 pounds, and I guess I was finally at the end of exhaustion from looking at all the life leaving her body, and I slept instead of my usual on-guard stance. I thought my body was well programmed for vigilance and used to this kind of drain. I had struggled to keep on my own weight through the years, trapped in a body that was riddled by irritation when I tried to digest food. I only nourished it to get by and survive my life, but did not thrive inside it. Seeing her frailty was different than seeing mine. I was shocked to see her slipping away on her own like a dream or a horror. I wasn't sure anymore. Was that really her? Was I dreaming or watching her ghost and she was already gone? Pancreatic cancer had taken hold and she could not walk on her own at that point. As I came to remember this, my own yelp at the sight of her fully woke me. It startled my father awake too. Neither one of us knew how to stay fully awake through this. To say we were tired from the death watch would be an understatement. We were each on separate islands of grief, relentlessly swimming to shore yet sinking midway with effort. He swooped in and I watched their bodies make a three-legged race-like version of a trip to the bathroom. At the toilet, I watched my father be the deep-throated rescuer my mother used to tell me stories about. His voice was low and gentle, like my mom said it was in all her stories of when they first met. Unexpectedly, I had tears in my eyes and realization boomed loudly in my head. Where is my rescuer? Then some stronger version of darkness came through as truth. You are not part of this. You will never be rescued if you don't wake up. With that, I suddenly realized how long I had been on the outside of a story looking in, trapped in darkness, trying to protect light, but not really feeling it there inside me. There was another narrative underneath this skin I was wearing. I won't ever know why it was right then 4 decades of my real story would come back to me. The memories came back, evidence I had felt bad about myself for a long time. I was open to remembering, and it all came back. Childhood molestation, sexual intrusion, and being manipulated. The loneliness my family never knew, as they all lived lives that started without me and left me behind unknowingly. It all flooded me. We must be left, discarded, or disappointed in some way by someone we love, often more than once. Then profoundly, there's that last time. Sometimes it's like a straw that breaks the camel's back, a final loss, and we come to face ourselves. That is what I've come to realize. Sometimes we miss out on the conversations, opportunities, and even experience losses, not as punishment, but as invitations. What we miss in the outer world, either connections, closure, or resolutions, often becomes the very ground on which inner work begins. These moments create space for us to turn inward, to have a conversation with ourselves that we once sought to have with others. Through that inner dialogue, healing and clarity begin. These conversations are aching inside us to be had. They are in many ways petulant and demanding, calling you to do the inner work to reach them on your own. Loss has become a telescope down on my life and not up to the stars. So many memories of the other narrative, the one that was only mine alone, came back. Instead of the stars, I saw the reality of the earth I lived on, and everything was different. It would feel like loss initially, and I would be angry. My mother was not emotionally available in life or in death to talk to me about it all. But I would come to own that if I had done the inner work, I would have been ready to talk, and that was on me. So I looked in the telescope and realized this was a true tool for seeing things. I would need more tools for seeing things after this, many more. The tools will be written about here. The conversations that we could have often don't occur. The conversations with the perfect parent, sibling, partner, or fantasy-carrying adult who was always there is a bit of a fairy tale for so many of us. The best gift we can give are missed conversations and the severed connections and unfinished emotional wounds with others is the inner work and conversations we need to have with ourselves. I looked at my mother's role in my life, both my parents' roles, and realized there are all sorts of ways to be a parent. None of them can be good or bad. I imagined the inner work they missed out on that I was now about to possibly get a crack at, and I grieved. I felt all the generations of my family with me in what I now held in my hands, the chance to do inner work. I won't know what they did with their inner worlds, but I could feel it. I needed to do my own work. When you look at the spectrum of opportunity we have as adults to do inner work before entering any relationship that is meant to be foundational and secure, it's very rare there is an open gap of time to do inner work. We don't get tools to do inner work in school and come out prepared. We have to find them. I found them through facing things. Everyone finds the tools they need through facing things. The book I write is more about organizing these tools so you see yourself finding them and keep moving ahead with what works. What flooded me that day was the fragmented sensations of feeling responsible for the ways others felt. Before this, my parents hunched in the bathroom together while I was out at sea with the deathbed as my own private stranded island. When I woke to this, I was alone in a deep realization of loneliness, and I knew that I had been there for several decades. I had been on this deathbed island much longer than the startled slumber of that day, and it was me that was dying on it, not my mother. The story my mother told me came back like muffled sound. I can't say how I remember her from the womb telling me, "I need your help, little one." She told me I was the key to making it all work, It was muffled inside the walls of the womb space room I lived in, growing a belief in me that I had to help. I know now we all kill a part of ourselves so we don't have to face a damaged narrative and heal it. I killed a part of myself off so I wouldn't have to face it, and I lived like a shell of me. My mom was too frail and caught in the storyline, even on her deathbed, but somehow she showed me how much we were all taking it to the grave not to tell our stories. In frailty, she still reached for her lipstick and tried to get herself to the bathroom. I finally abandoned her effort to make things look a certain way, fell asleep, and then, despite the tiredness of grief and loss, I woke up and found the beginnings of my self-healing. We just have to wake up to pain eventually. My mother slipped away, clenching lipstick and untold stories. I let her go and never told her. While I felt that loss, somehow I didn't close a door, I opened one. It did take twice as long as her dying to heal this half-alive living I was doing, but now I have the tools for all the phases of healing: narrative healing, reprocessing healing, and relational healing. I will show you how to enter the narrative healing phase in this book and can show you the tools to consider using inside this phase. There are other phases of healing to consider. The primer tools for these phases are offered in the invitation resources and links in this book. These resources will grow as I update, as I continue my journey forevermore. So hold on to this self-directed learning and healing invitation as a permanent lifetime access to establishing your own toolbox approach, where you may consider a reprocessing healing phase with the Holding Space subscription on Substack, or lastly, enclosed is a structure for after you finish reading regarding how to hold space for whatever healing journey you want to have and do a relational healing phase of your journey with coaching and courses. But no matter what, read on and discover. It's truly up to you to wake up to the fragmented narrative inside in order to heal. No one can force you in. You must walk in on your own. Prepare to arrive.
Thank you so much for that reading, Melinda. There was so much, I mean, beautiful language and metaphor, but also such real grounding. So thank you so much for giving that for us today. At this time, we do also have time for our audience Q&A. So if you have a question for one or more of our authors, please make sure to put those in the chat so I can make sure they get asked. We do have a question that is for all three authors to start us off. And this question is, you are all mental health professionals or have expertise in what you're writing about. What was the first moment that made you realize you wanted to write a book about those expertises? I'm thinking we could go in reading order. So Nancy, do you want to start us off with this one? Oh, sorry, Nancy, I forgot about the unmute. Here you go.
There we go. Kind of a hard question to answer because it wasn't one moment in time. I started writing about this topic of life-changing events with my dissertation, and then continued with it off and on over the years. This most recent version of that type of writing has been started about 3 years ago and came with inside what Jung would call a big or numinous dream, which I can't tell the whole dream right now, it would take too long. But it was an invitation from one of the characters in the dream, who was called the Great Artist, to share the essence of the dream in writing. And so that's what I did. And it was about a 3-year process.
Yeah, I like that you said it's not exactly one moment that you sort of realize. I think for some writers, it really can be that. And for some, it's this kind of amalgamation of experiences and thoughts and moments that you have, and it kind of coalesces eventually into a book. But definitely good to hear one such experience. Karen, what about you? What was the first moment that set this book, um, made you realize you wanted to write this book, or was there just one moment?
I think that for me, it was I left the addiction field because of what happened in Canada, and that's was the treatment system just was not functioning at all. And what I had seen in the treatment system was so horrible, which led me to leave. And so the book was the way to right the wrongs that I had seen. So I had to, it was the truth telling. I decided that the truth needed to be told, and there was a lot of things that people had no idea that was occurring, and I had an inside view and I wanted people to know.
Yeah, definitely. The kind of like a spreading the message kind of mission, which I think, especially for a topic like this, it's so critical, especially you're raising awareness or shedding new light on a topic. So I think that totally makes sense as well. And Melinda, what about you? What was the moment that you knew you wanted to write this book?
Um, like some of the other authors, I think it's the moments before. And now that the book clears so much memory of what was blocked, I can kind of have a deeper awareness of like all the stories in me from all the parts of me that were cut off. And I think most profoundly, when all this was coming up, I doubled down and I certified more in trauma. And there's an approach that I really encourage everybody to look into. It's written, there's a lot of self-help literature on it now, called internal family systems. And I was working with a selectively mute client with a lot of trauma, and no one, 23 years old, been trying to treat the trauma since they were 3 years old, and it wasn't. I was like I was the end of the road, and I started teaching the individual about internal family systems just on a whim. And as I was teaching them, since they don't talk, I was realizing I was talking to myself, like reteaching myself internal family systems, and kind of started to realize to model it to this person, I had to model little mini stories from each of my parts for the individual. And that's what really made me start to go, oh my God, like all my tools have to be written about. Like people have to have privacy. It's not always going to come out in a therapy session, or you're not always going to present the right way. You may have such a symptom that's blocking you from the connection of the person helping you. So that's a long-winded answer, that it just, through realizing these tools had to come out through human stories, that's what really propelled me to write.
Yeah, I love this idea of, your instinct was to kind of dig into learning more and become just having this curious approach to it. I think that it's such a good sign for the quality of the work in the pages too. So I think, it has that side effect, but that's great to hear about.
Thank
We've
you.
got another question, kind of related actually, again, for all three authors. As experts in what you're studying or what you do in your day-to-day life, if your readers were to take away just one feeling or idea from your book, what do you hope that idea is? Karen, do you want to start us off this time?
I wanted people to know for a fact that addiction could be treated and people could get well, unlike the message that was being delivered was that they couldn't be. We'd reached this in Canada where we were just giving them the drugs saying, well, that's the best we can do. And the reality was, no, that wasn't. We could get people well. We could get them living better lives. We could give them something that would change the nature of their lives forever. I mean, it had happened to me. And I wanted that for sure to be known.
Yeah, pushing against that status quo. I mean, it's an uphill battle, that's for sure. But again, I think that's part of why it's so important to do that pushing. Melinda, what about you? If your readers were to take away just one feeling or idea or even technique from your book, what do you hope it is?
I think kind of like Karen was saying, democratizing mental health. I don't want it to be tied to a copay or coverage or a therapist's office. It's like a human right. Physical health, mental health, it's yours. You have it. You're born with it, and we're not teaching people how to maintain it and enhance it. So that's really what motivates me. I hope people feel the power in the pages is not me. It's kicking up something in you, that you do have the power to help yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's really helpful for people to hear and understand that not only as kind of an abstract idea, but also an idea that mental health professionals themselves are behind and are really believing in themselves. So again, really helpful to hear that too. And Nancy, what about you? If there was one feeling or one idea that your readers would take away from your book, what would be the most important thing for that to be?
There. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I wrote the book for people who have been through or who are going through some sort of disastrous, usually life-changing event. Sometimes it can be miraculous, but whatever it is, it's a total violation of their expectation of how their lives should unfold. And the message in the book is that that's not the end. It's never the end, even though it feels like this event is killing me or I don't know who I am on the other side of it. It can be completely untethering, but the point of the book is to stay with it. It's taking you somewhere if you will let it. So it's a message of hope and hopefully inspiration to have people stay with it. It has the power to take you someplace that you could never imagine.
Absolutely. Sometimes that perseverance is so challenging but I mean, that can be really so rewarding in itself too. And Nancy, while we're here with you, there's a question about the title of your book. What
Mm-hmm.
does the canvas represent?
Mm-hmm. This came from the dream, the great artist dream. The canvas is in a scene in the dream where I'm invited to study under the great artist along with my friend Maggie, and he escorts us into his studio. And on the back wall of the studio is this huge canvas with everything you can imagine painted on it. It's any aspect of life. It's fat sheep grazing in a pasture. It's equations on a computer screen. It's starlight, it's witches, it's gnomes, it's anything. And it's the energy from it is palpable. In the dream, this represents our picture of reality. It's everything that we think we can imagine to be true. And as the dream progresses, the great artist takes his X-Acto knife and slashes through the canvas. He completely decimates it. And so it's like our reaction to that rupture is the key. And that's what the book, it takes us through how you can respond to a rupture in your own life. So the canvas is a picture of reality. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. There's like all this kind of meaning baked in there. I think it's so interesting to hear about.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at this time, we're approaching, or we are on the hour now. So I just want to say first to all three of our authors, thank you so much for sharing these books with us, especially all the readings we heard today were extremely personal and emotional. And I think it's so, um, I'm very grateful for the three of you feeling comfortable and able to do that and share that with all of this audience here today. To the audience as well, thank you for joining us and helping us celebrate these wonderful authors together. Of course, I also want to remind you that you can order Rupture in the Canvas, Stealing Addiction, and You Are Not Broken from the links in the chat. I'm just putting those links all in there one more time, just so they're super easy for you to access and check out. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or of course, submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. We'll look forward to hearing from you, but until then, that's it for today. So have a great close to your weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.